should we sort of like get started or push forward? Or I think there were only like 7 people that had said that they were going to join. I've got like 3 of you now, so yeah.
Sure.
All right, I'll do it. Okay, cool. It's all being recorded, so we're good. So I don't know if anybody actually like looked into anything. I mean, my intention was that this is going to be more of a study group, not just like I don't like didactic teaching. I like collaborations. So I don't know if anyone like came to this with anything or like questions or experiences. I posted like the topics that seemed like would be good to address given what everyone was saying, but um and just a reminder, so that was going to be we're going to talk about like dysregulation and specifically like resistance and demand avoidance. That was going to be a big one. People were talking about wanting to address perfect pitch or absolute pitch. Um, yeah. So,
Can I ask a question ahead of
yeah.
time?
Hmm.
One thing that I'm interested in is developing a questionnaire for parents so that I get accurate information
Mm,
before starting to work with a student.
okay.
Because I realized later that things come up that it's like, oh, I wish I would have known this. This is not one of the things they told me about their child. Um,
Got it. Got it. Okay. Out of curiosity, so the things that come up that you wish they told you, so what would that entail?
um, like really practical things, like their sense of personal space, like
Okay.
whether it's okay to touch them or not
Okay.
without permission, like in the action of like using bean bags or props
Hmm.
and things, which I would do with, you know, there was a time where I very slowly, very gently put a bean bag on a child's shoulder, and I was waiting for cues to find out that it was going to be okay or not,
Hmm.
and it obviously wasn't.
Okay.
So those are the kind of things I would like to know ahead of time. How do they like what's the nuts and bolts of what it looks like?
That makes sense. And I like how you latch onto like practical things, like and I had sort of said this in some of the comments that we've been having so far. I don't really care about someone's diagnoses because honestly, when it comes to teaching, that means very little. Everyone is so different. I'm totally gonna butcher it, but there's a great quote about like, well, if you've met someone with autism, you've met one person with autism.
Right.
Like, yeah, so I don't care about any of that. But no, what you're talking about makes total sense. It's about, how we interact with students. Um, yeah, that's tricky with parents. So, I mean, the big things that come to mind for me, and everyone, like, feel free to chime in as far as your own experiences on this. First of all, I don't just direct this at parents. I want the student involved. I'm very much about collaboration. So even if it's a questionnaire where you're like, I want parents and students to sit down together and talk about this. And I can understand if they're a new student, maybe encouraging them to consider it first and then come and talk to you because you don't know like what comfort level will be around that. But ideally, we want the students' input as well, not just the parents, because in my experience, parents don't always understand what's going on with their kids. I will pick up on stuff with kids very quickly that parents are like, huh, I never knew that before.
Yeah, and just because I'm going to be off camera for part of this, the other thing that I wanted to bring up with that is trying to figure out if the child is actually ready for informal guidance or formal music
Hmm.
instruction.
Oh,
Um,
okay.
because like the most recent child I worked with was verbal, but
Mhm.
after several months, it appeared that all the issues we were having were related to other things, not around music instruction. And we got to such a tiny bit of music instruction that I felt like it wasn't really even beneficial for them to be there with me. So like questionnaires for parents, I just really want to determine if it's going to be a good fit because I don't want to waste months of their time and my time
Fair enough. Yeah.
figuring out that this is not a good fit or they're not ready for music. They have too many other things they need to work on in general
Hmm.
first.
Okay.
So,
I wrote down your
so I'm
questions and yeah, we can totally get into that. That's all. Unfortunately, I don't think anything with neurodivergence is like an easy answer, or the answer is probably not what you want to hear. That like, well, it depends. And
yeah.
um honestly, even stuff like, oh, do they want to like be touched? Are they okay with that? how are the stars aligned? What's their mood today? How did they sleep? What have they eaten?
Right.
If it's actually, I see this with a lot of like teenage girls. Where are they in their monthly cycle? I don't ask that, but I mean, like everything can affect this. And so maybe they're okay with being touched last week, but not today. So
Hmm.
honestly, I've kind of adopted a policy of, I mean, it's good to talk about that stuff up front, but I always ask consent. And like, is it okay if I touch you right now? Just quickly, like that's sort of like a reflex for me at this point. And then, yeah, it's just building things like that into your teaching. I don't know if you feel like you already do that, but yeah, affirming teaching takes a lot more work and awareness on our parts. There's no sugarcoating it. It just does. But I feel like it's incredibly rewarding too. And we learn so much more. But at least that's
Okay, well,
my mindset.
I'm happy to listen and learn. I'm gonna turn off my camera if I figure out
Okay,
how to
yeah, of
do
course. But yeah, those are my thoughts. I don't know if you guys have any thoughts on what she just brought up in those points. But
No, I'm here as a sponge. I have
okay.
nothing to give. I'm here
Okay.
just to learn. I'm sorry.
No, it's okay. Well, you mentioned, is it okay if I share you were talking about like your son and his diagnosis? And
Sure.
so, like, as a parent, then in this situation, and having an autistic son starting lessons, so what was your experience? Like, what would you have appreciated with that?
Um, well, it's different. It's different. And speaking of sons, I have my children here with me here today, so I might
Okay.
be interrupted.
No worries.
I hang on a second.
While we're waiting on that, Arielle, what's your background and experience as far as like teaching with neurodivergence and
Really not a lot. I have one student who is, I think, twice exceptional was the term.
hmm
And um, I had him for 2 years in person when I was living in Arizona, and he was in a group class. Sometimes he was individual, and then he was in a group. It was like a mix of group and individual.
got
And
it?
I found that he needed like a lot of brain breaks, lots of time to draw, um,
hmm
which was fine. That was definitely easier to do in the group than individually. And then he has a great sense of rhythm and pitch.
hmm
Um, and now he's online. And that's been a big adjustment, from group in person to online
hmm
individual. So that has been a difficult transition. His
Yeah.
parents and I did figure out that he definitely needs to eat before the lesson.
Yes.
He cannot be hungry.
Yep.
Otherwise, it's not good. Also better if
Yep.
he's not tired.
Yeah, it's hard. I have lots of students I see online and like I you can tell when like the focus is gone and they're like playing with their face in the camera and not listening to you. Like,
Yeah, mine
yeah.
doesn't do that a lot, but
Okay.
he will groan, which is sad.
Mhm. Okay.
Um, I
Okay.
feel bad. But yeah, it's been my biggest like struggle has been figuring out how to, well, how to teach him. Oh my goodness.
Yeah.
Um, because he can sing the pieces fairly easily, but the
Mhm.
coordination is difficult for him.
Oh,
But then like improvising is also difficult for him. And then he gets frustrated if we just work on the piece. So I'm like, I don't know what to do.
okay.
Let's do
No,
some
fair
reading and
enough.
writing. That's good.
Okay. Now, that is definitely with neurodivergent students, that transition from in person to on the screen. I mean, I know it's very possible, and like we have teachers on here that talk about all the time, like how much remote teaching they do, and it's so different. I wish that it was like easy to equate and be like, oh, we're just gonna like jump over, but it's a whole different way of teaching. Yeah. And then Bethany, so I was asking about you and like that parental perspective.
So it's a world of difference in my experience to have a neurodivergent child and to witness them in their own piano lessons since I don't personally teach my own children
Oh,
piano
yeah.
lessons.
Oh my God.
And
I get that.
it's so different. my perspective on my children versus my perspective on my students. And so it's like two different worlds, and it's hard for me to have the same outlook on them equally, because I know my children very intimately, and I know kind of what makes them tick, and I also have far less patience with my own children, just being, they're my children, we always are so much more patient with other people's kids usually. And just, I'm sorry?
Well, you get paid to be.
There you go. Yes, yeah, exactly. So there's just so many different factors. It's just an interesting, but as far as what I would have, loved to have known coming in, I don't know about my own kids, but with my students, my main, I'm similar to Margaret, is that I have a couple students that are, I don't know the term, I don't know my terminologies, my correct terminologies for a lot of things. So forgive me if I'm not saying it the right way, but they don't want to follow instructions. They really struggle with, they want to do things their way, which is so amazing in so many ways, because I give them the freedom to do that, especially in keyboard games. But when I have a couple that are ready for formal instruction, and I don't know if they're going to be able to. I don't know how I'm going to get through a whole, I don't know how to move to be able to really assess where they're at when they won't do certain steps, so I can assess them, so that I know kind of if they're ready, if they're not ready. So I don't know. I guess I'm looking for some creative ways to kind of get around the typical teaching of a typical child, neurotypical child, and get ideas for, well, when student A does this shows that they're ready, even though you may not recognize it, kind of a thing. So, yeah.
No, that makes total sense. Okay, so yeah, I think we can dive in here. There's a lot to cover. We'll see what we can do, and we'll see who else joins, but all right. I'm wondering if it would make sense to start with, like you said, that Bethany, you're saying that you aren't really well versed with the terminology. I don't know if like Margaret or Arielle, am I saying your name right? Arielle? Like I see the spelling is a little different than.
It's Arielle. Right.
Arielle. Okay, I'm gonna try really. Oh, there we go. We got someone else. I'm gonna try to remember that. I'm terrible with names.
That's okay.
Would it be helpful to go over just like basic definitions and terminology?
Yeah.
Yeah. Are you guys? Do you guys feel like you need that as well, like Margaret and Arielle? Maybe. Kind of. Right. And hello, Grace. Thank you for joining. Hey, I'm Emily.
Hi, good to be here. Sorry I'm late. I was navigating one line to the post office.
It is okay. You are fine. I figure like we're all busy and have lives, and we're just sort of like hopping in when we can. We were mainly like introducing ourselves and getting an idea of like what everyone is wanting to address, what their questions are. I was writing down some good stuff that we're going to cover. So I was actually about to just get into like some basic definitions and terminology, because that's an area that can be confusing for a lot of people. I don't know. It's like, Grace, what's your background as far as like neurodivergence? Are you coming to learn? Do you have a lot of experience with it?
Yeah, I think have kind of stumbled into having a fair number of some diagnosed, some not. Mostly ADHD, I would say. I did have very autistic student, but we didn't keep doing lessons this year, but I taught him for 2 years, I think. My son, who's 7, has ADHD, so there's some other stuff in the mix that's not totally explained by that diagnosis, but definitely have a mix, I think, at this point. But I don't feel very educated. Like I don't feel well equipped in terms of like a clear picture of what works. I just have that sense of I'm navigating it and I figure out what works. I have one student that she will come in sometimes and we will spend the whole half hour on her whatever her fixation is that day, because that's what's going to work for the day. So things like that, where it's just It's not necessarily intentional and planned. It's things that are coming to the surface that work.
Okay, got it. And what I will say is honestly, in my opinion and experience, your instincts there are dead on. The number one thing is flexibility.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, there, I wish it was as simple as like, write down these steps and this is going to work for everyone. Like, no, so actually that does segue us really nicely into what is neurodiversity and just, I think everyone kind of has a general idea of what it is, but, um, okay, so neurodiversity. Um, so basically, this is just a concept that it was, I mean, technically it's existed for all of human history, but as far as like a recognizable and discussed concept, it dates back to like the 1980s, 90s, and it was really born from the autism community. And it's just applicable to all of humanity. It's just diversity, but at a neurological level, right? So neurodiversity encompasses all of us. So then, like, if I'm gonna get like really, splitting hairs here, we don't call somebody neurodiverse. Diversity is about a group. It's referring to a bunch of people. So a person can be neurodivergent, as in diverging from the norm, but then you can see how that might start to get a little bit problematic. And there's all kinds of rabbit holes we could go down there. Um, so other terms that get thrown out, sort of like the other side of that coin, like neurotypical is a term that, again, this is very like commonly said, but it is starting to become a little bit more problematic because like, well, what is typical? What is normative versus divergent? Um, so the understandings around this have been very, very mixed over time. Historically, it's really been informed by medical models of like disorder and then disability. And like even to this day in the DSM, most neurodivergent diagnoses like autism, ADHD, they're called disorders. Um, so this has been a huge thing that we'll see if the DSM-6 finally updates it and no longer calls autism a disorder. The push has been to get rid of the disorder model and just look at it as a neurotype. That this is just, yeah, it's a function of evolution that we have creative thinkers and big picture thinkers and analytical thinkers, and we need that diversity. It's essential in nature. And so this is just your neurotype. And then there can be, and often are, like coexisting disorders of like cognitive or physical nature, but that's a separate thing. So that's sort of like the social model that everyone's pushing towards. So does that make sense so far?
So what I'm hearing you say is that if I have what is now called someone who is, high on the spectrum, um, less able to, maybe they can't speak, or they have difficulty with motor. So that, what we would see as an obvious disorder, that's not necessary. So that's the different cognitive and physical things that you're saying that they would separately diagnose as apart from the neurotype that you're talking about.
Right.
Is that what you're?
Yeah. So the
Okay.
current model right now, like for autism, is you have levels one, two, and three, and it's, level one is lower support needs and then up to high support needs. So if you have like someone with level three autism, right now that model is saying that that is someone who's, we've heard of like, again, these are kind of become problematic terms, but like high functioning versus lower functioning, or like, more autistic or less autistic. It's like the model they're pushing for is no, autism is a neurotype. Like anything, it runs a spectrum. But then people's support needs, that's what you have to look at. And so you can say that someone is like autistic and has like, maybe there's a cognitive or intellectual disorder that requires support needs that's coexisting with that. And there's definitely, I mean, I am not a neuroscientist, so I'm having to like regurgitate sort of where research is at. There is known correlation and suspected causation between certain neurotypes and disorders. Like we know that, for example, we're hopefully going to get to perfect pitch, that occurs much more frequently within autism and other neurodivergent, you within other like neurotypes than it does like in the general population, if that makes sense. But not everybody that is autistic has auditory processing disorder. that the two are more likely to occur together, but it's not a rule. So hopefully, did that answer your question?
Yeah, for sure.
Okay.
Yeah.
Honestly, the definition of autism has changed so drastically. I'm in the middle of writing my thesis right now, and I went through this whole craziness of like researching the beginnings of affirming education and disability in education. And like when it comes to like mental disability and like it's really getting to like the history of autism and that understanding. It is crazy where we started versus where we're at now. Um, so it's kind of hard, like, okay, this is what autism means to some people today, but that's going to change next week. So,
What are you
yeah.
studying, Emily?
So I am getting my master's in music education, but I'm specifically focusing on neurodiversity in music education and neuroforming learning. Um, and yeah, I'm about to start a study specifically on visually supporting music learning. And yes, I love MLT, and I know it's all about sound before sight, but I don't follow that. So yeah. Um, no, don't get me wrong. I love MLT. I love so much of what Gordon did. I do still believe vision, it needs to support audiation. That's the key difference. I'm not throwing notation at students at day one, but anyway, that's like a whole other thing. Okay, so we've got, hopefully that was like a good overview of yeah, neurodiversity. And like, okay, so we talked about like neurodiversity, neurodiverse, neurodivergent, neurotypical, neurotype. So yeah, it's just like what is your neurological pattern that we can label. I mean, they're all just labels at the end of the day. Oh, right, I threw on here one of my favorite up and coming labels that I definitely use to describe my two children. Neurospicy. Yes, love that one.
That's an actual legitimate like label that.
Oh yeah. Yeah.
Oh wow.
Yeah, I mean like socially, not medically.
Yeah.
But no, that is really becoming a thing. And honestly, I kind of like that it's speaking to a bigger concept that we have all these labels, but their meanings are changing. And it's really just getting to the point that we all diverge in some way, every single one of us. There's no such thing as someone actually being like typical. So I kind of like that. If anything, it really speaks to that. But yeah, I've got two kids. My um 8-year-old who is ADHD, so that's autism ADHD. Again, like there's so much overlap with these things. And then my daughter who is 4, almost 5, and diagnosed ADHD. I myself, ADHD, my father, my sister, like it runs rampant in our family. I suspect my husband is neurodivergent, so yeah, it's everywhere. So just neurospicy. Nice, general, usually socially amusing label. Anyway, okay. Hello, Melanie. We're just going over basic terminology and definitions within neurodiversity. I don't know if you have any questions around that, if you feel like it's something you're pretty well versed in or something that's really confusing.
I think because I've joined late, I'm happy just to see what you're doing, and I'll ask
No
questions at the
worries.
end.
Okay. No worries. Well, we were about to start talking about it seems like everyone is really concerned about like demand avoidance. And like
That's the word you used before. That's another term that I've not heard. What would be a former term for that? What does that stand for? Like what can you define that for us?
Yeah, sure. So demand avoidance. Now there's so I'm gonna like butcher this now. So there's actually like a clinical like diagnosis of it's something demand avoidance. I'm blanking right now. I could look it up, but like that is like a component of usually autism diagnoses that some students will exhibit like this very, very objectionable.
Is it PDA?
Yeah, thank you. Thank you. Is that
And
part
it's
of demand avoidance?
pathological. Yeah,
There's a
push
okay.
a push to call it persistent demand or drive for autonomy.
Awesome. Okay. Awesome. Love like collaboration and group.
What is that?
So, okay, that is actually considered like a diagnosis right now in conjunction with neurotypes. That is when you have somebody that like literally you ask them like, "Oh, can you please go get yourself a lollipop?" They will say no because they just want to avoid
that as ODD, like oppositional
right.
defiance disorder or something. Is that what it used to be called now, or is that?
I
Or is
I
that
I'll
something
be honest,
different?
I don't know if those are distinct. They're certainly like highly related. I can tell like people are like going, please look up and tell me, yeah. Um, but there's this whole thing about like diagnosing like defiance with neurodivergence. So you can do that, but again, like what I was saying at the beginning, a lot of the time I don't really care about diagnoses because it all presents so differently with everyone anyway. I have not, excuse me, personally had a student that genuinely will just say no to everything I say because of just saying no. That normally when they say no, there's other reasons going on. So the way I look at it is like, I, if you have a student that you think is actually just wanting to say no, that's a separate matter that we could look at. But usually there's something else happening that we have to consider. So I don't know if anyone here has actually had a student where you know they're just saying no to say no. Yeah, okay. And would you say that that's like a consistent behavior that you've witnessed with the student, or is it more occasional?
You talking to me? Sorry.
Yeah.
Yeah, I've got a couple of students, and a couple of who are related to me, who
Mhm.
my nieces, who won't do anything I ask them to do. But I don't know if that's because I'm their aunt, but I also suspect there's neurodivergence at play, that one of them might, I
Right.
think, or
Now, when
something.
you say that they won't do anything you ask them to do, like, okay, you ask them, like, can you please go get your shoes? They won't do it, right? But,
Oh, well, yeah. So we're going to say anything. They don't want to play the piano, I suppose there's that.
oh, okay, okay, that's different.
They will offer me their compositions, but they don't want to accept any suggestions,
Yeah,
even,
okay,
keyboard games.
yep, yep.
Um,
So,
I
okay,
love their compositions, obviously, but it would be nice to do something else. But I don't know, something.
but yeah, they won't do it. Okay. So that's not like diagnosed demand avoidance. That is control. So that's what I was getting at. There's actual like like a pathological need to like contradict, and then there is seeking control. So I think what most of us encounter is actually a seeking of control. And there's actually very important reasons behind that and why we see it so much with neurodivergence that I'm coming from the camp that there's no such thing as bad behaviors. That doesn't exist. Every behavior is communicating something. So avoiding it's communicating something and seeking control. So there's lots of reasons this can happen. But honestly, the biggest one that I have certainly seen the most, and I think is like the number one that when you start to look this up, they'll talk about is it's you're seeking control of your environment to maintain regulation. It's all about regulation versus dysregulation. So we're talking about terminology. Does everyone know what that means to be regulated versus dysregulated?
I
Explain
think
your
so.
definition.
Oh, so like if I say like dysregulation, does everyone have a general sense of what that means to be dysregulated? Yeah.
Yeah.
Yes.
Okay.
However, since you're recording this
Uh-huh.
and we don't know who's going to be watching it, I think it's perfectly fine for you to start at the beginning and explain everything because it may be useful.
Okay, I can certainly do that. So dysregulation, it's something that we all experience at times. So it's that, okay, I really should have like actually written down like basic definitions on this one too. I wrote down plenty of notes, but it's like, oh, we're getting into other stuff now that, so dysregulation, it's typically like it's a nervous system reaction. So we're talking about neurodiversity, which means at its core, like this has to do with our nervous system and how it functions. So if I'm going to like go back to basics really quickly, so your nervous system, two main components, your peripheral nervous system and your central nervous system. So your peripheral is basically what interacts with the world, what's perceiving sensory input, and what is actually like, when you want to like act on your environment, it's through your peripheral nervous system. And then all cognition is up here in the brain and the central nervous system. And neurodiversity is anything in that entire complex system that could diverge. So already you can see where I'm like, well, there's no manual of like just do steps 1, 2, and 3 because oh my God, the amount going on in that is huge. So dysregulation, um, it can happen anywhere, but it's a breakdown in this process, and then like the whole system basically goes into like shutdown. So what we typically see is like fight or flight, like this. That's like part of our autonomic nervous system that we just have like, oh goodness. So that's like a lot of reflexes and like automatic functions of the body. So like breathing and heart rate and stuff that we don't have to think about, right? So stress responses are autonomic. So when you have a neurodivergent student that goes into dysregulation, a lot of the time it's like they get stuck in fight or flight and they can't control it. And that's really jarring. Like all of us have experienced stress and anxiety and fight or flight. And then when you have a super sensitive nervous system that's functioning outside of the norm, I keep using air quotes here, that can be even more disconcerting. So a lot of neurodivergent learners, they don't follow directions because they're seeking control of their environment to avoid that experience. That is a really, really difficult experience, particularly for neurodivergence. So at its core, that most of the time is what's going on. So then we have to look at, well, what could be causing dysregulation? What are the common triggers? So far, all that making sense, that autonomy, control, avoiding dysregulation, there's the chain. Okay. So I really should have written out my notes in like a better way to just like put up here for you guys. One of the biggest triggers of dysregulation is sensory. So out of curiosity, if I ask like, how many senses do we have? What are most people going to say? Yeah, there we go. Yeah. So, okay. Yeah, yeah. So I'm seeing 5, 7, 8. So I am going to say we, like in grade school, learn it as 5, right? I in music we only typically use 3 of them, which would be like physical, auditory, and visual, and they've got your chemical, which is the taste and smell. Neurodivergence, we have to consider synesthesia, the crossing over of senses. So you could have arguably some experience of taste and smell with music, but it's not what's considered the norm. But anyway, any of those senses can become, or they can be like oversensitive, undersensitive, and cause dysregulation. Um, Now, a lot of people say more like 7 or 8 senses because physical breaks down quite a bit. We've got tactile, like touch. We've got interoceptive, that's your awareness of your internal systems, like knowing you have to go to the bathroom, or your emotional awareness. You have proprioceptive, which is your positioning in space. A great check of that is like, can you close your eyes and touch your nose? That's proprioception. And then vestibular is movement. So then you see this a lot like with ADHDers that like they have to get up, they have to move. And like stimming, that's vestibular. So we have all these subcategories of physical. So that's when you see people saying we have 7 or 8 senses. Anyway, so a lot of neurodivergence, there are differences in sensory perception, and that is causing this whole chain reaction, as you can imagine. So a lot of the time then you see a student that is not paying attention, not focusing, and you don't even realize like it's stemming from the HVAC system is running and it's totally like auditorily like messing with them. And like, how would you possibly know that? And you just had a horrible lesson and it was all because the heater was on. So it is the amount in the environment that can cause dysregulation is crazy. I don't know if that just like opened up a whole can of worms or if that's helpful to know that like yeah, I questions so far or no or yeah, we're good. Okay. Oh,
It's
Good
all
note.
very helpful.
It's
okay.
really helpful.
Okay. Melanie, I'm seeing you laughing over there. Is it just like, oh crud, way more to think about now? Yeah. So yeah, sorry, that's why I gave the overview of the nervous system because it's like the amount that happens with that. And then a breakdown can be anywhere. It's like, oh God, like there's so much to track and think about. And I haven't even gotten into central. I've just been talking about peripheral. Um, so then I was just talking about sensing, but then obviously we use the peripheral system again when we're acting on our environment. So like when we're actually trying to play piano. So a lot of the time what you see with that then is like students that struggle with praxis, with movement. So like they might know what they need to do in their head, but actually getting their body to coordinate movement and do it. So like a common diagnosis is apraxia, that motor control and coordination. But like I said, it's on that other planning side. It's not on the sensing side. So yeah, that can be a huge issue. And then we have to get into like the processing and the cognitive part. I'm just sorry, like I mentioned, I have ADHD and I'm like spinning around everywhere, like, oh goodness, okay, where do we go next? Because it's all super interrelated as well. It's not like it's separate, distinct things. Um, I'm gonna
I
just
have
sort
ADHD also, and so I understand. And
yeah.
you're doing a great job.
Oh, thank you. I feel like I'm constantly chasing squirrels. But it's also that's why I love doing research. Like ADHD, the brain is like set up so well for research and finding patterns and connecting dots. But oh my gosh, maintaining like where was I? Tracking where you are in all the chaos can be very difficult. Um, Anyway, yeah. So you can see all of a sudden with everything going on here, and then you have especially a young learner that they don't understand what neurodivergence is and what's going on in their body. All they know is that all of a sudden they're dysregulated and they want to avoid that. So then that turns into, I don't want to practice or I don't want to play that piece. And they can't explain, oh, that piece, is really hard for me to control my movements and coordinate and causes a lot of frustration and will dysregulate me. They just say no. Right. So I was just talking with my advisor about this, that I really, as a teacher, I think of my job much more as being a detective slash guide. You have to figure out what's going on and then guide students around that, through that, considering that. That is affirming teaching, which, oh, like I said, super rewarding, but oh my gosh. So no two kids look the same. Or adults. I have plenty of adults too. Okay, so central nervous system. Um, Cognition. We talk about this a lot, particularly in MLT. We talk about it's like cognitively informed music teaching, and I'm curious like what people's views are on what is cognition, because the truth is there's a lot of disagreement. There's no good unifying answer. So, anyone?
I've
If not,
always
it's okay.
thought of it just as thinking, but now that you've said that, I'm like, that sounds way too simple.
Well, honestly, so it sounds really simple, but the best definitions are really the simplest. I can't stand definitions that are like, 20 sentences long. Because it's like, okay, you've gone like way too far with this. So, yeah, we need something really, really simple. So, thinking, I feel like that's a great way to look at it. Um, I really, for me, I consider it to be like how we understand, how we form meaning. I'm not saying that like this is, the only answer. That's just for me when I see it like that, then I can see like, oh, it is incredibly intricate, but like what is the purpose of all of those intricate steps? Like what are we building up to? And we're trying to establish meaning. Um, at least where I'm at right now, that's what it looks like to me. So cognition, all that, happening up here. Pardon me, I'm sorry. That's going to be on recording now. Great. Um, okay, so lots that happens here as well with neurodivergence. One of the big ones is executive functioning. I don't know if you guys have heard those terms before. Yeah, so executive functioning is not actually cognition, but it's happening up there as well. So, oh my gosh, I should have already had this up. So there are a lot of different things that happen within executive functioning. So we've got like working memory and recall. We've got our perception of time. We've got our emotional regulation. So like when your nervous system gets dysregulated and then like you've seen kids have like a full-blown emotional meltdown. That's executive functioning, that emotional regulation that they can't take a beat and say, okay, that was really frustrating, but I don't need to throw this book because of it. That that I don't want to say like missing piece, but like there can be a problem right there as far as being able to control that impulse. So then impulse control, that's part of executive functioning. Flexibility and adaptability. So this is a big one as well when we're giving instructions to students. So one of the big things that a lot of neurodivergent students struggle with is transitions or task switching. And that again, executive function, the ability to jump from like, I was doing this and now I need to do that. So when you have especially a student that's like hyper fixated on something or really wants to follow, like, where's the motivation, where's the interest, and then you're asking them to do something else, that can be an issue of transitioning and task switching. So executive functions basically help to facilitate all these cognitive processes. And when you've got some issues with that functioning, you can see like this is going to cause a lot of breakdown pretty quickly. So incredibly common within neurodivergence. The other one that, so I've been giving a lot of stuff that's just like in models of neurodivergence. What you don't see as much of with cognition models normally with neurodivergence, but I've been looking to a lot more lately is theory of mind. So I don't know how much people are aware of that. It's a psychological term. So theory of mind is basically your awareness of others outside of you. So you've probably heard a lot of stereotypes of like, oh, like autistic kids are not socially aware. They don't like read body language or they can't understand other people's perspectives. And I'm not saying that that's actually like fair to say of everybody, but there's where these stereotypes come from is this concept of theory of mind that children are very self-centered, and then as they mature and develop, then they become more aware of their surroundings and relativity. So then within neurodivergence, we can see differences with this, and maybe the theory of mind hasn't developed the way that we would expect by a certain age. So then that can get into things like social awareness, observation of your surroundings. Again, that can cause dysregulation. Communication with others. Communication is a huge area where we run into issues with neurodivergence. One of the earliest signs of neurodivergence is language and its development or lack of development. I shared that my son is diagnosed ADHD, so that's autism ADHD. And one of the very first signs was that his language was not developing the way that it was supposed to. That's the case for a lot of people, especially with autism diagnoses. But again, I'm not going to say exclusively or like everybody. I know plenty of people where language developed typically. So, yeah, I feel like I was trying to like answer stuff and really I'm just giving you like, here's an entire list of everything to go look at and consider. Any questions at this point?
This is super helpful.
Okay.
I have a question. Well, it's
Yeah.
like a practical question. Is that okay?
Yeah, go for it.
Okay. So, I have seen with my student like the difficulty with task switching.
Mhm.
But there's a weird balance that I can't seem to strike because if he spends too long on something that he really wants to get, like a piece,
Mhm.
but he can't get it, then he gets frustrated,
Yep.
and then we'll shut down.
Yep.
But if we're spending time on something that is easier, he'll get bored more quickly, even though we're not like done. Like he hasn't quite gotten it yet. But I also, so that's just to throw out there. Maybe you can speak on that. But I'm also curious if you or how you adapt the Music Moves lesson plans, if you use those, because I feel like there is a ton of task switching in
There
those.
is. So I will be honest. I own the Music Moves series. I have taken courses on Music Moves. I do use it sometimes. I don't actually stick to it the way most piano teachers do. I use it as an idea of some or like suggestions of things that I could do. And I know that there are other teachers that are like very diligent about sticking to it and have a lot of success with that. And that's awesome. But I have just run into um too many situations where I can tell that what's being asked is not necessarily the most appropriate thing in that moment at that time for that student. So yeah, like I had said earlier, I definitely diverge from a lot of what is conventionally taught in MLT and with music moves specifically. Yeah, I mean, there's a lot that I could say around that. Okay, sorry, because you were bringing. Oh yeah, Grace.
I was just going to pop in a little bit and say I've definitely noticed for me, I just rearrange. I have not been super strict about following the lesson plans in the last few months, but once I got familiar with them enough, I would just rearrange. And I have a lot of keyboard game students, so that there just were not as many transitions. So for a lot of my kiddos that have trouble with that, we will just have activity time and keyboard time. Like
Yep.
it's very much keeping that straightforward. I am really fascinated to talk more about Emily, what you said about having that visual, like what you're studying and your emphasis of the visual learning supports, because I have a couple of students where no matter what I do, there's something that's not clicking and they are needing the visual support. And I'm now in this space where I'm like, feeling very uncertain of what kind of visual support to give them.
Okay.
So it's like I had a conversation with this kiddo's mom the other day where I'm just like, we haven't quite found the what was the term? Kind of cracked the code or whatever. Like
Right.
there's something there, and I want to acknowledge it from my end. Like that's my job, and
Mhm.
I'm working and trying things, and I'd really appreciate feedback from you in terms of what you see work and not work. But we've gone over so many harmonic patterns. We've gone over like
Okay.
copying
Yeah.
things, and she can sing the song the next week, but she cannot remember the skills. She cannot copy it unless I give her like a super slow visual, three different ways of what we're doing on the violin.
Right.
So,
So
the,
I will say, speaking to that, yeah, the reason I am studying what I am is because I noticed so quickly that I had way too many students that needed visual and struggled with working memory. Um, and specifically, they needed visual and physical. And I know physical is a huge part of MLT, and there is a visual component of that because we observe. But it was more than that. So that I could talk so much about like how to design visuals towards student learning, and that's like literally exactly what I am doing my observational study on. I want to make sure that Arielle, that I addressed your stuff. So you're talking about like you're not sure how to like deal with the transitions, and it's tough to answer that exactly because I'd want to see what's going on because again, everyone is so different. But my inclination is that there probably needs to be some thought about, well, where are we at right now? What are the learning goals? And how do we scaffold to get from here to there? I don't know if you've taken much time to think about what your scaffolding approach is. Is that something that you guys know what that is, scaffolding? Yeah.
I know the term, and like, yeah, I know what it is. I guess I haven't thought about it from like an executive functioning or these other things you've listed, because I have been trying to follow my students at the end of book one, the one I'm talking
Mhm.
about. And there's like a ton of musical scaffolding in
Mhm.
in music moves.
There
So
is. Yeah.
so that's, I guess, what I've been thinking in terms of, but I
Okay.
haven't known how to think in terms of like, okay, what's the working memory requirement here, or
Right.
the task switching and stuff like that.
Yeah. So music moves is heavily sequenced, and notice I changed my word there. It is a method, music moves, and methods are sequenced. They're not individualized, they're sequenced, which automatically now we have a problem with neurodivergence because we don't all process the same way. that's one of the big reasons I use it as a suggestion and I don't use it exclusively. So what I do is I individualize scaffolding. And that's what I've been doing with visuals, so sort of connecting back to you, Grace. Because yeah, you need to figure out, well, oh, maybe they have a working memory issue, or maybe there's like an auditory processing issue. So the scaffolding to get from point A to point B is going to look different for that student versus a student where auditory is not a problem. They've got a great memory, but they're having a hard time with motor coordination. Totally different learning goals, totally different scaffolding now. So hopefully that's making sense. But like my thought is with your student, Arielle, that you're saying, like he really, really wants to play the songs that are of interest to him, but he gets frustrated. So I guess my instinct, just from like our bit of talking as well, how can we support his learning of what's motivating him? Because you need to stick with what's going to be motivating, particularly like his behavior is showing you he's got to do what's motivated or you're going to lose him. But skill wise, conceptually, he's not at that level yet. So we've got to scaffold the heck out of it. So where do you start from? Where is he at? And then hopefully avoiding the frustration. But yeah, anytime I start to see my students getting frustrated, I immediately stop. I mean, in part because I don't want to dysregulate them, but also I'm taking that as input. I'm constantly observing like behaviors, communication. They are communicating, oh, we have a problem. We've missed something conceptually, sensorily. There's something going on. There's a breakdown. I need to figure out what it is. Let's back up. So, getting back into that detective mode. I could easily, oh yeah, Grace?
I think, so for me, I'm relating the scaffolding, 'cause the area that I see it in is our very executively dysfunctional family. Like we have a lot of challenge with just getting anything accomplished.
Mm-hmm.
Of course, they can focus on whatever project they're doing and
Yeah.
do the heck out of it. Like it's just the way
Right.
it is. But to actually, see that the room is dirty, is really, really challenging. So
Mhm.
that's the connection I'm making, is like, okay, so for these students that I am noticing, and I guess here's where I'm going to be reflecting as well myself, is I teach a certain way because I am a certain way.
Right.
And I observe a certain way. So I'm not necessarily teaching in a neurotypical focused way, whatever that is, right?
Right.
Air quotes, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
So I'm not necessarily aiming. I'm aiming my teaching at what worked for me and what has worked in my general experience for students, which probably leans mostly neurotypical and includes flexibility for more of a range of students. So all that said, looking at the students where I have this little flag in my mind, right? I'm going, something's not clicking for this student. To then take that concept of scaffolding, I think the challenge for me is like really identifying. So even just the term working memory with that one violin student I was just talking about, I'm like, that working memory. I don't know how to scaffold for working memory because I've always had, for me, that has not been challenging.
Right.
So that's where I struggle to actually come up with.
Yes. And what you just touched on is one of the biggest arguments in my thesis, is that it's our human nature that we assume uniformity, that everybody else experiences things the way we do. And the truth is, all experience is relative. Nobody else experiences what you do. And recognizing that is definitely like an oh crap moment. And then I guess I've gotten to the point with it where that excites me, because then that's how I learn and that's how we grow. But yeah, everyone perceives things so differently, and just we have to be aware of our own limitations and our own biases, because of course we're coming at this from our own perspective. Perspective is limited.
Can I add a comment to this thread? I just discovered a few years ago that I have ADHD, and there's
Mm,
possibly a little bit of ADHD as well.
me too. I'm
But
adult diagnosis. Don't you love that? Because girls don't have
yeah,
ADHD. We're not going to
finally
look
made
at that.
at age 60 to realize, oh, that's why. Like my mother talked about me
Yeah.
being dysregulated as an infant, and she described it to me.
Hmm.
I'm like, wow, that's really interesting.
Yeah.
That she said I would stiffen my whole body and scream, and she couldn't
Hmm.
do anything. She had no idea what was happening. But anyway, one other thing about me is that I have done all the music play, the early childhood component, and music moves for piano. I'm teaching up through book 5,
Hmm.
and I've been doing it for so long that for me it's become just I think I know all the parts so well that when I realize a student's having a challenge with something, I can just like go way back to I can help them figure out where they're at, and I can scaffold them from birth up. I go back and I often will talk to my adult students. So I tell them the best students are the ones like one of my friends said, I'm just a baby. I don't know anything. Just teach me like I'm a baby. And I'm like, you
Hmm.
are the perfect student because you're
Hmm.
willing to go back there. And with children, I don't tell them what we're doing, but I will go back and reach into music play, into informal guidance
Hmm.
activities, or whatever I need to. And Marilyn herself said, we don't have to do all these components in every lesson. She
Hmm.
was very big on sometimes let's just sit down and like play through all these pieces in a book. Sometimes let's just do a whole bunch of activities.
Hmm.
And so that helps my students with the task switching. Um, and it, also, as far as the time blindness goes, I very definitely have that. Some of my students have to tell me when it's time to stop.
Yep.
I always tell the parents, please come in and get them, or we will not stop. Wait forever till I
That's a
see.
good sign though, when things just keep going. Or I love it when kids look and like, oh my gosh, it's already been 40 minutes. I'm like, yep. No,
Yeah.
that's a good sign.
I also wanted to recommend a book that I listened to by Audible. I have a friend who's a speech pathologist, and she actually
Mm,
knew this author because he was in our area. He was in St. Louis for a while.
okay.
But it's called Uniquely Human, A Different Way of Seeing Autism by Barry H. Prizant. And
Oh,
it is
yes.
such, and I don't know where my camera is.
Yeah,
Here
I
we
love
go.
Barry Prizant. He was one of the founding researchers for Gestalt processing. Yes.
He's amazing. And I've learned so much just general knowledge from him.
Yeah.
Like I even refer to things now as children have enthusiasms for certain things.
Oh, I like that. That's so much better than like fixation because that sounds
Right,
so
right. Because
clinical. I like
so
that. Okay.
it's the truth.
It
It's
absolutely
much more
is.
true. It's what they're enthusiastic about in this time period. And
Yes.
it's only a problem for other people. It's not a problem for them.
Right. That is such a big thing that we have to look at whenever we're trying to like redirect or correct something. I've really had to work on this because, with ADHD, I'm very much about controlling my environment and self-regulation. I totally identify with that. Um, am I asking somebody to do something for like a functional purpose, or is it more like is it not needed? Like I that was the wrong way to say it. What I'm asking, is it essential or not? That's just like such a good question, like with parenting, with teaching, because there's so much like even just I love my son's teacher. She's awesome. We're very, very lucky that he's mainstream, but he's got an incredible teacher. But there's little things that'll come up where like I know she has a rule where she doesn't want students to wear hoods in the classroom. And like this is very much just like yeah, it's a mindset from several decades ago, like you take your hat off inside kind of thing. But I'm immediately thinking, why do we actually need that though? Is that essential? Because for some students, that's actually regulating. So learning to let certain things go that I used to be worried about. And like there's times that I know we want good technique at the piano, but when we're working on something that's more about not technique, but more like conceptual, I guess I would say, I don't care if they're standing or sitting on their foot, or I just let them do what they need to do, right? It's like, whereas any of us in lessons, like as kids, would we be able to get away with that? Be like, nope, you have to sit there and you have to,
I always also explain everything to my students, whether they're
yes,
adults, and I say, right now we're focusing on one thing. We're focusing on
all the
this
time.
one
Yeah.
thing,
Hmm.
and we're not really worrying about those other things right now. Once
Yes.
you get good at this, we'll focus on a different thing. Then we'll try to do them together. But right
Yes.
now, just so that they're not so critical of themselves.
And that's such a beautiful example of scaffolding too, that I find a lot of the time I need to serve as somebody's executive functioning. If it's not working for them, I have to do it. So that's how I'm supporting and scaffolding. So yeah, like that. So I was going to say when it comes to transitions, one of the best things we can do for students is to give warning, to give a heads up. Um, so I will tell students, especially when I know we're doing an activity that's going to be really fun for them. It's like, all right, Ella, with your student that like really likes this piece, you can maybe say like, all right, here's the deal. We're going to work on this piece right now, but we're specifically going to do just like this activity and then this activity. And when we're done with those, we're going to move on to something else. Like, I don't know if you ever give like a visual or explain, here's how it's going to go, here's what we're going to do. I should have gotten into that earlier, actually. Executive functioning scaffolding, huge, huge, huge. Visual schedules.
I really love what you said that you act as their executive functioning. And I think I realized that I'm doing that for kids,
Yeah.
all my kids,
Yeah.
not just, so I don't really treat any of them, I treat them all differently, but I give them what they need, hopefully.
Yeah. Yeah, that's exactly what we're supposed to observe what's going on and then respond accordingly to the needs that they're showing us. And so then like when it comes to visuals, like you were asking about Grace, so I've really been classifying visuals as like, what is their purpose? What type of visual is this? So a whole category of visuals and like why I like to use visuals mainly is that they're serving to facilitate executive functioning where it's not happening the way we need it to independently. So it can be as simple as like music notation. It really is a memory device. Actually, you know what I just learned, and maybe you guys know this, and I'm just behind, but like the word note comes from the word NEUME or memory, mnemonics, memory device, and that the original NEUMEs were literally just like squiggles, like following note contour. If you want to go way, way, way back.
How do you spell NEUME?
Good question.
NEUM.
NEU.
M.
Yeah, NEUME.
Yeah, that's very interesting. Sometimes I even do units with kids where we go out and listen to things and I ask them to figure out their own way of notating.
Yes. Okay. So actually, we're going to talk about visuals. Yes. This is what I do. So here's the thing though. I don't just do it on paper. I mean, I will if that's what a student wants. I do this with Legos. I do this with toys. Like one of my
I do
favorite
popsicle
activities.
sticks.
Yes. Yes.
They have
So,
short ones and long ones and fat
mhm.
ones.
So then what I've been studying with this is in that process of asking a student to create a representation of a musical concept, we are getting a window into their mental representations. And it is astounding what you find. And this is how I design visuals, Grace, and then how I scaffold. Um, I have discovered so much. The amount of my left-handed students that perceive pitch the opposite direction is crazy. And I wouldn't know it unless I ask them to show me what's going on. But I can't say it like that, especially with a little kid. So we have to do all kinds of things like observing their gestures or playing games with other concepts that are more relatable to them. Or I found, oh, who was it? I had a student that up and down meant something very different to him than before and after. And so I had to change my terminology. And then I incorporate these things in visuals. So much is really a conceptual difference. And then you got all like the dysregulation and neurodivergence going on top of that. So really maybe the root of dysregulation is a conceptual difference that hasn't been recognized. Like I've got a very, very smart 8-year-old that He is he is all about decoding. He is incredibly bottom up analytical, and we did start very auditory, and he's been great with that, and he's really enjoyed it. But he also really loves symbolic associations, numbers, letters, and he's great with rhythm symbols, but when it comes to pitch contour, he refused. He hated it. I was getting so much avoidance. And I finally just figured out yesterday in his lesson, he knows which way is up and which way is down. He knows how that, on the piano, that he knows that this sounds like up and this sounds like down. But for whatever reason in translation, looking at it on a page and then translating it to the instrument, he flips it and he's a lefty. So what I then did, I was experimenting. I'm like, okay, I'm going to give you a visual. Like, we're just doing the melody of Pirates of the Caribbean because what kid doesn't like that? So yeah, a kid who has always resisted note contour, I just flipped the contour and then he played it perfectly. I'm like, are you kidding me? So I need to go mirror image all of your music right now and then you can do it. All right. So now my scaffolding plan for this, I'm literally going to take, like, this is simplified notation. We're like at the beginnings, but I'm going to go into Canva and do a vertical rotation on every line and give it back to him. And we're going to start there, and then we're going to try to sequence him towards the correct direction, strictly because that is how music is written, and I want him to be able to function in music. That's the only reason. So that's my scaffolding protocol for him.
There is a particular method, I don't remember the name of it, which takes the notation and turns it.
Oh, I've done that too. So I have one of my students that we do piano, but we also do singing. And she had the hardest time understanding. So she was struggling with notation. And yeah, we had to do that. We had to switch to the direction of the piano because you guys probably already know this, but I had this talk with students like, which way is up? Which way is down? Like, we learned this very early on just through movement and experience. And now which way is up and down on the piano? That there's that flip that happens. So already we were asking students to translate something on the piano that can be very challenging. But yeah, so I was thinking of that student that we had to change notation, that I actually will make keyboard maps for students now. And so I will find ways to write pitch horizontally instead of vertically to support them. And then they're fine. And then actually with this same student, so she was really struggling with auditory, but she was great at decoding. But I could tell there was an auditory and motor issue going on. And she was like typical tone deaf. So we ended up just on a whiteboard, I wrote out, well, like, if here's the top of the piano and here's the bottom, like going back to vertical representation, where do you think your voice is in that piano range? And I realized that she was imagining her voice being here and here. I'm like, no. Your voice in this scheme is actually just right here. And I had to give her that comparison and bringing like that relative idea into it, that her voice feels different than over here. And then giving her like the neumes of the notes up and down. And then all of a sudden she was able to sing it once she understood, like, oh, my voice high feels very different than what a piano sounds like high. Am I making sense? Like there's like all these levels. I feel like I'm starting to get a little bit abstract. Am I losing people or are we okay? Yeah,
It's good. I'm just like, brain is
I'm sorry. And this is, yeah, and
but
then
it's really good.
Crazy and fast. So really everything that we're talking about really gets to the heart of something that I've been like deep diving into lately and like very excited about and very confused by all at the same time, which is really this concept of relativity, because music is all relative, right? That's how we explain meter and, like our macro and micro beats, and how we explain, harmonic functions. It's all relative. But relativity, understanding that concept, we all approach it very differently. That actually our understanding of relativity falls on a continuum. That is one of the big missing pieces in a lot of cognitive models. And I don't know how much Gordon was thinking about that. I know that there's some more like out there text that he did, like space audiation and whatnot, that I need to dive into more, and he might have been touching on it there. But there is this newer approach to cognition that's really looking at how is somebody processing? Are they super analytical and they're looking at like components and then they have to build up from there? Or is it someone who naturally comes in looking at the whole and then they can see patterns, but they struggle to break down into individual parts and how they all relate together? So that I feel like is really, when it comes to like conceptual music stuff, like that's really getting to the heart of like where we run into problems, and how we're conceptualizing something is not necessarily where someone else is on that continuum. And as musicians, we have to learn how to move back and forth. Gordon talked about whole part whole a lot, right? Um, yeah, and then dealing with that when you have executive functioning differences, when you have sensory processing differences, because we learn through bodily experience, and our senses, you can see we're like, oh my God, now all of this is really going to affect how we're conceptualizing. So I have a feeling I just like made everything worse and not better with my 1 hour TED talk here. But basically, I had to finally give myself permission to be like, nothing we do in a music lesson, or nothing like, there's nothing that we can consider in a music lesson that isn't somehow applicable and related, because there, where needs are at, what could be causing any kind of dysregulation, like there's so much going on for students that we wouldn't even think to consider. Hopefully that made sense. Yeah. Yes.
One thing that's been on my mind recently has been, I see sometimes comments when people who don't know about MLT, kind of music teachers, this idea that everyone learns differently and that this is the modern approach and this is the way of thinking about it, is that everybody learns differently. And
Right.
I've been thinking about that in conjunction with MLT, which is this kind of unified idea of how we all learn. And I just wonder, as somebody who understands MLT and who understands neurodivergence in depth, what do you think? I mean, how do you square the kind of, because I feel like MLT is talking about deeper processes which are more intrinsic to all humans,
Yeah.
right? So how do I say to somebody, but everybody learns differently, so why are you saying everybody's the same, everybody could learn this way, or
Right.
anyway,
Um,
that's fuzzy, but could you talk more about that? That would be really useful.
yeah, oh, good. Well, I mean, it's something I think about all the time. So I really appreciate that Gordon really insisted that MLT was a living, evolving theory. And I think that in many ways he was ahead of his time, but in many ways he was a product of his time. I mean, the majority of his research was the 1970s, right? And so we're only like a decade or so out from the cognitive revolution, which was very much about uniformity. Whereas now, like I said, we're getting into models like I've been learning about, cognitive continuum theory. It's like, oh, yeah, it's really getting to what we're talking about, like how different we all conceive stuff, that I imagine today he would be embracing stuff like that. So I guess my thought would be old school MLT. No, I don't think it's entirely applicable anymore. I think it's highly valuable and informs a more modern approach that now is, informed by modern cognitive understanding. I don't know if that really answers it. So that's one of the reasons I don't really feel the need to strictly adhere to things. And I do have to remind myself, so we're so used, well, I should say I am so used to like looking at patterns and sequence, and Gordon was very, very clear, like, okay, it's a learning or a music learning sequence, but we bridge. It doesn't have to be linear. And it's really, really easy to forget that. So I think in many ways he was actually kind of considering this already. But I mean, how many people actually remember to bridge and how many people just go linear? Like I know I default to linear pretty quickly when I'm looking at a sequence. Right? Yeah, I don't know.
I tend to just throw stuff at my students.
Okay.
So
That works too.
so I bridge. And then
Yeah.
I'm like, oh, maybe Maybe I should, but I just take it as information.
Well, okay, yeah. So I guess I should clarify. I'm not saying that I teach students like following a linear sequence. What I mean is, okay, if we back up, like you're saying, like when someone is critical of MLT, my guess is they're looking at it as a sequence, like a linear sequence, and they don't understand he was bridging. He wasn't linear. He was like, we can look at a linear trajectory, but it's far more nuanced than that. So I think in many ways he was speaking to this, and those critics don't quite grasp
Yeah,
that.
I'm not saying people are being critical. I'm just saying that people who don't even know about MLT, when you say, well, this is this idea of how humans learn, they're like,
Mhm.
oh, but everybody's different. Don't you understand that everybody's different?
Mhm.
And of course, they're not understanding even anything about what MLT is. But I
Oh, okay, okay, got
don't
it. Well, I
necessarily
mean,
in the UK, very few people know about
okay,
MLT.
got it. Well, I mean, I would also say just like theory that everybody learns differently is a universal theory. Like it is like
I'd be thinking it informs your approach, doesn't it? It informs your communication style when you
mhm,
have neurodivergent students. And it,
yeah.
of course, because we know MLT is really so flexible and there are so many components and ways that you can move around sequence and everything.
Mhm.
Yeah, we can be very flexible with it. But yes, I think I've had trouble kind of explaining that and also kind of squaring it with this. Well, am I saying that I think ultimately everybody's the same, that everybody could learn through MLT? Um,
Mhm.
that's not quite the right thought to have about it.
Um, you know, I'd be really curious to hear some other people's opinions on this that did not join the meeting today, but like how Margaret was getting to the point about like she's so well versed in music moves at this point that she can like she's fluent in it. She can just move back and forth. And I think that ideally that's where you can get where MLT is more a framework to function within. It's not a method. I mean, he was always really, really particular about that. So, what am I trying to say here?
I like to say it this way that um, these are all the ways that we've discovered that brains learn music.
Uh-huh.
These are all the ways that we've learned, and we can explore all these ways. We can put them in any order we need to for any child. We can look at their strengths and we can look at their challenges and we can kind of help them get from strengths and working through challenges. And
Hmm.
they don't all learn at the same pace. It's a straight path for some kids and a very circuitous path for others.
Hmm.
Um, so I think I just kind of pull whatever I feel is going to be helpful in the moment when we're having a one of those times where something isn't clicking, and then just waiting. A lot of times parents just um, like I have a parent who's was a little upset that her daughter she thought her daughter wasn't ready after having lessons for more than a year. But maybe we should just take a break and like, no, she's doing fine. Everything is fine. When I want her to be successful. So when I run up at something that she's not successful at, I'm gonna back off a little bit and give her brain time to develop, time to grow. It'll click someday. We
Hmm.
don't have to keep pushing a particular thing. We can just wait, and time changes things.
And I do agree with that. Time does change things. So first of all, I really love the way you were describing all of that. It was far more eloquent and just better than what I was saying. I can tell you have rehearsed that and said it many times. So that's
Actually,
great.
it's just actually I'm just I've been working on this process of speaking from the present moment
Mhm.
experience. So it might seem eloquent, but I can't really tell you what I just said.
Okay, well, we've got it recorded, so we're good. No, that was awesome. And I think that really it spoke much better to what I was like very poorly trying to circle around. That yeah, I think MLT at its core really is embracing diversity of learning if you understand it the right way. And it's a constantly evolving and changing understanding of music and learning it. Um,
I am interested in this idea that that you were saying about the visual. be
Yeah.
finding visual things because
Yeah.
yeah, that is something I tend now to avoid, having kind of changed what I'm doing. But
Hmm.
I'm really interested in how people kind of manage that who know about MLT.
Right. Well, so I want my visuals to support understanding, which is really like the root of audiation is understanding, right? Um, so if you think about like just a mnemonic devices, a lot of visuals just serve as what am I trying to say here? Ugh. Okay, so a lot of the ways that we try to like support memory and like provide executive functioning is like meaningless mnemonic devices. Like how many of us learned like every good boy does fine, which no one remembers that. I hate those kinds of things. I want anything I do, whether it's a visual or physical or auditory support, it needs to be meaningful. So, sorry, where am I going with this? So with visuals, I feel like if they are meaningful and relevant to the situation, then they can actually support audiation. The problem is like typical music notation, there's so much symbol or symbolism involved that's very abstract, and that is meaningless to a student that has not really internalized those symbols yet. So that can be really problematic to start there, but that doesn't mean that we don't use visual supports. And the truth is, okay, let's take visuals out of the equation. You're kidding yourself if you think visuals aren't still part of this. Because even if you're not, even if a student's not looking at a piece of music or a visual support I made, they are still representing a concept in their head. We're not escaping it. It's there. So we might as well figure out how it's happening and work with it. I can tell I just like,
That was brilliant.
oh, thank you.
I love that. So what you're saying is that even though we're not consciously using visual representations, students are creating visual representations
Yeah.
in their own minds.
Yeah. Yes. Now, I should clarify our ability to visually represent something is different. There's actually, I am blanking on the name of it right now, but there actually is a condition where like you don't have a mind's eye per se. Excuse me. Um, and so there's still visual representations, or sorry, there's still mental representations happening. So maybe that's what I should say is no matter what we do in an environment, no matter what we demonstrate for a student, they are going to mentally represent. It is likely going to some degree, be visual. It's highly unusual for it to be absolutely not visual whatsoever. That is practically unheard of, and like a diagnosed condition if you don't do that. But certainly they experience it to different levels. Now, visuals, we have to clarify, they can be very concrete. It can be like images, or they can be symbolic. For example, I've got a teenager that I work with, I've had for years, and I finally learned 2 years ago, she's got sound sight synesthesia. And so she's very much about color symbolism. That is visual, but it's not necessarily like, here's a picture of a dog when I hear the word dog, right? But like she hears notes and she sees a very distinct pattern of colors and movement. That is her visual representation. So visuals can run this very interesting spectrum of like completely abstract symbols to very concrete images. And so we need to understand where students are on that spectrum and then like how they're using those to conceptualize, how they're transforming their visuals. And then we can support learning and scaffold learning that way. So like I said, once I understood that my student was visualizing notes with contour, he was just going the other direction. I'm like, oh, okay, so we can use that. I just need to flip it for you. But then my student with sound sight synesthesia, we actually did a really, really cool, like informal study, and I really need to graph it all out. She loves to paint. She's very color oriented. And so I was giving her different auditory stimuli, and then she was describing it and painting for me what she was seeing. And we have a whole bunch of samples of this. And we were using that to find patterns of how she conceptualizes. And I found it's actually very much relative. It's not like she hears one frequency and it's this exact shade of red. It's that she hears these frequencies moving in, this harmonic progression. And then she visualizes like that will trigger like slower movement in darker shades of blue. That like darker shades tend to like match a certain range of the piano, or like certain movement matches certain types of harmonic progression, if I'm making sense. So there's like all kinds of, oh yeah. Are you asking a question, Grace?
Sorry, I was just saying I have to go.
Oh, got it. Okay. Well, thank you for hopping on.
Yeah,
Yeah.
thank you so much.
Zoom quit unexpectedly. Um, okay. We'll see if the recording actually got saved. I don't know. We'll find out. Okay. I hope it did, but we'll find out. Okay. So what I was saying about like how I start to look at different visuals. Goodness, where was I? Can you remind me, please?
Can I just ask a question?
Yeah.
When you said there's always something visual going on,
Yeah.
that's really blown my mind a bit, because
Okay.
in trying to
Yeah.
see, well, I learned very notation first, so for me they're kind of,
Mhm.
but you're saying there's always something if you're teaching
Yeah.
orally. So
Yeah.
you mean when the student is audiating, or when they're in preparatory audiation, or like all the way
Hmm.
through, or it's going to be
Yeah.
something visual
Yeah.
going on in their section of like rhythm?
Yeah. So any concept. So when we're grappling with a concept, or even like receiving a stimuli, there's some type of conceptualization going on in our mind.
Mhm.
So part of conceptualization is visual representations. Yeah. And
Right.
it might not even be something you're aware of.
And you try and get it out of them to kind of demonstrate how they,
Yeah.
for example, if they can feel do day and do daddy,
Right.
how they might want to represent that some other way.
Right. So like
Mhm.
I actually find with a lot of my students, especially I don't want to say that things apply to everybody, that it really does run a full spectrum, but like a lot of my autistic students, they are really, really great when it comes to pitch, and then they really struggle when it comes to rhythm. And I have lots of thoughts around that, but there's like motor control and motion issues and like movement difficulties there. Oh, yes.
Sorry, no, that just made so much sense.
Oh, okay. Yeah. Um, yes, I really hate to say that something applies to everybody, but in general, the pattern that I've seen is neurodivergence. Like if we think about like if we're in the middle, we have relatively equal like tonal and rhythmic abilities. I'm not saying they are equal, but the discrepancy between the two is probably a smaller range. And then what happens is neurodivergence, discrepancies with intelligence, or I know we're talking about aptitude, but like it gets further apart. That is and we see this in pretty much all types of intelligence and aptitude. So neurodivergent individuals that are like incredibly good at math but really, really struggle with communication, something like that, the discrepancies of skills become more obvious. So I see this in music, and more often than not my autistic students are very high tonally. That's where we see a lot of perfect pitch, and then rhythmic struggle. And like I said, what tends to line up, like how do we experience rhythm? It's space, and space is understood through movement. That's our representation of space, right? So a lot of the time there's motor coordination issues going on with those same students. And then you want to get to visual processing. Movement, we visualize it, right? There's a reason that up and down, like we do this on the page. That's our visual of up and down. So then it can be really disconcerting for a student on the piano when their up and down just got flipped to side to side. The visual doesn't line up anymore. So visuals are always happening. And the other piece of that is visuals they can always interfere too. So again, like with the piano, we conceptualize the up and down, but then you have the side to side that there can be an interference there that you haven't like rectified how those two can simultaneously exist. And both of them are like this visual thing that you're like trying to figure out, and a physical thing. I hope I'm making sense here. I feel like it's getting kind of like I'm sounding very philosophical now, but actually another visual.
Emily.
Oh, thank you. Another visual that I've actually really been dealing with lately with the piano is I love the piano. It was my very first, well, singing was my first instrument, but piano was my first like external instrument. Love it. It's great visually in a lot of ways, but it's actually really, really contradictory to audiation because it is all based on white notes. When you look at it, good luck understanding why D flat can also be do. When you're a kid, it's not like there's a reason why C major is the easiest to us on a piano, and it's not just feel. Visually, it is the easiest. So actually one of the things that I've done lately, I didn't even bring it in here, but I've been developing, like I have this chain of beads that I've made, and I have students do this, like I bring out this huge bag of beads and I'm like, okay, we have 7 tones in our scale. Like they know this, they like solfege. Like I want you to pick out 7 different beads that you really like, different colors, and we're gonna put a bead on every note of the piano. Like in an octave, excuse me. And so inevitably they'll do that and I'll be like, great, but did you actually put one on every note in the octave? And actually, let me back up. So I don't even talk about the 7 tones. I just say like, here's, do to do, put a bead on every single note. They'll always do it on the white notes first. It is very, very rare that a student also does it on the black notes. I'm like, okay, wonderful. Well, there's our scale, but you're missing 5. So then they go and get beads for that. I'm like, okay, so what happened? And so then we explain, well, those notes still exist. They're just as important as the white notes, but we don't tend to see them on the piano or think of them that way. When you're learning to audiate on the piano, it's very visually counter to that process.
I think that's why Marilyn started with black keys, and besides the fact that they're raised and they're easier to play.
Yes, and that I'm totally on board with that. I love using the black keys a lot, but that doesn't take away the fact that the piano itself is very white note centric. Like even if, how do I put this? So yes, like you want to start with black. Oh God, what am I trying to say here? Starting with the black keys definitely helps, and at least conceptually then you can understand they're just as important as the white keys, but visually you still run into the issue that the white keys, it's like someone took a highlighter and only highlighted certain notes. The white against the black is like highlighting. So it's really hard to read everything when only certain items are highlighted, and then to have to take what is a sound concept and transpose it to like, find me an F sharp scale. Right? Whereas if theoretically, if all the keys actually looked identical, I think it would actually be a lot easier because then their concept of half steps and whole steps could take over.
I do see that point.
Yeah, one of the things that I will do is I'll literally take a book and cover the lower part with the white notes. They only have the black and white, and they still have the colors then, but at least they can like, am I making sense? Like then they can actually just like sequentially like push each note, and like they're all actually equally important notes at the end of the day.
Right.
So we'll do that. Anyway, with the beads, what I've been doing is I let them figure out like, okay, if we're going to do a solfege scale and we end up using clear beads for the black notes, then like what color feels like do, what color feels like so. I tend to just go in rainbow order because then if you'd follow like Roy G. Biv, you get 7 tones. And then it's actually really cool. Your primary colors, red, yellow, blue, are your 1 pattern. Yeah, so it can kind of be some meaningful symbolism, sort of. Anyway, I let students do what they want, though, because again, a lot of these students are color oriented. How are they representing? I always make room for their representations. And then we put it on a string, and they can have 1 bead per note. And then what's really fun is I pick it up and say that do is the red bead, right? If we just go in rainbow order, like, great, now let's pick it up and move it. And I put the red bead on A flat, and they can see We just moved their whole scale. They still have like the clear beads where they belong for skipping. So we now just made a color representation of a scale that's movable. The piano's not movable. So that's been a really fun one. I really love those types of interactive visuals because physical is such an important part of this, and that's when we can start to really get in there. I feel like I'm like going off on tangents. We haven't even really talked about perfect pitch at all, and I am going to have to let this go pretty soon. I hope that we got the recording on the beginning part.
I'm gonna have to leave because I have to go to physical therapy now.
Okay, yeah, I have a student coming in 20 minutes, but yeah, Melanie?
Just to kind of circle back to what you said at the start when you said thinking about dysregulation because of sensory stuff. I suppose that's given me a lot to think about, actually. And that thing of being a detective and what might it be that's if something's overwhelming a student. So when there are challenges in teaching a neurodivergent student, you're saying a lot of the time it will be because of this sensory difference.
Yeah, not all the time, but absolutely. And the truth is dysregulation is usually a multifaceted occurrence. So maybe there's a sensory component, but then there's probably also an executive functioning component going on. And there might be an issue of motivation. The other thing we didn't even touch on that I do think is really important is masking. Do you guys know what that is? And I know you were saying, Margaret, that I should just like say stuff for the recording's sake, but yeah, when we just ask students to resist their needs and like conform, when we demand conformity, then we're asking somebody to mask. And masking,
we're covering up. We're learning how to appear normal. We're learning how to appear typical.
It's conformity. Yeah.
Yeah.
And masking, a lot of old school therapy is really about teaching masking, and we're now understanding that that is not actually affirming. That is not letting people learn in the most accessible and effective way. So if a student is masking, if they are being asked to conform and resist their needs and their urges, that can cause a huge amount of dysregulation. That'd be like if you were, think about like if you're really, really hungry and you're being asked to sit there and just deal with it and pay attention to something, good luck. So yeah, it's a sensory issue, but it's also a very like, it's beyond that. It's not just like, oh, that temperature triggers me. It's like, it's a need not being satisfied. So that tends to be a really big one. And I mentioned that a lot of neurodivergent students, they don't have great interoception. So like my son, for example, he doesn't just like, oh, I should probably try going to the bathroom. No, he is tearing through the house like a bat out of hell, and we're shouting at him to shut the door, and he barely makes it to the toilet in time to go to the bathroom. Because he hasn't recognized that his body needed to go, and he unknowingly has actually like been masking all of this going on. And you can see it, like he's getting really antsy and anxious and shaking. It's like, go to the bathroom. just put it down and go. He's like, oh, right. Like they can't make that connection that there's masking happening and a need not being satisfied. So that's a part of it too. Yeah. Anyway, I feel like there's just so many things that we could be covering. I really hope that the beginning got recorded. I feel like I have done a lot of talking, which I'm always happy to do, but I want to make sure that this really is like a forum for like collaborating and bringing our experiences and ideas together. I don't know if anyone else has like comments or things to throw out there before we wrap up.
I read a book a while ago, and I think I gave it to somebody, and it's called the Educators. I don't know if you can see it on this. No, you probably.
No. Oh, there it is. The Educator's Experience of Pathological.
That Pathological Demand Avoidance. Sorry.
Oh, there we go.
And I read it, and it was really. I need to reread it because it's just so different to how I dealt, how things were when I was at school, and that one-to-one kind of working out learning how you can do things when a child wants control, and how you can work with them. And I found that very interesting, but I need to learn more about it because I think I tend to revert to, oh, why can't we just be, why can't you just do what I say?
Yeah. Oh, and that's like, So
and all that stuff,
right, by them wanting control, it's us giving up control. So then you've got like the flip side of it. And I think a lot of people don't talk about this. Like it's all about affirming students as it should be. But in that process, a lot of the time we ourselves suffer through dysregulation, right? Looking at that dynamic of what regulates one may dysregulate another. And as
Yeah.
parents, we experience this all the time. Like my kids need me and want to be on me when they come home at the end of the day. And I'm touched out and I have to mask and suppress that and be there for them. But now I'm denying my needs and dysregulating.
And as a teacher, I want kids to learn and I want to, do stuff. But of course, sometimes they don't have the space, do they? Sometimes.
Right. Sometimes they don't have the space. And I do believe in always affirming and validating feelings. So when I have a student that's like, no, I don't want to do that, I'll immediately be like, okay, I hear that. It sounds like this doesn't seem very interesting right now. And then I'll immediately be like, okay, can you tell me why? Because a lot of the time they don't even know. And we sort of have to like be detectives together and work through it. So I never want to just tell a student, well, we have to, which I'm not saying anyone here does that, but like how many of us have received that kind of teaching?
Mhm.
And I don't get me wrong, there are times when someone's being asked to do something and they just have to. When there's an emergency, just got to do it. But in teaching, ideally, this is not an emergency situation, so we can be more detectives than that.
I've got a festival at school tomorrow, and
Okay, sometimes it is.
and like the day has been full of rehearsals, and the kids are starting to like mess around, and I'm like, we haven't got time, no time for
So
fun.
you know what? Okay, so like I do still have students that'll do like RCM exams and things like that, or recitals coming up, and so there can be emergency situations like that. I mean, I say emergency loosely, but I find it helps coming back to that idea of giving warning, letting them know, here's the deal. This is our goal today, guys, because this is coming up. I always explain why, like not in like a I'm going to stand up here and explain why for 20 minutes way, but people want to understand why they're doing what they're doing. They don't want to just do something without a purpose. So we need to focus on this today, guys. I know that's not how we normally do this, but we have to because it's our last lesson before this thing happens. So here's our approach today. Here's what we're going to do. Letting them be in on the process, that actually in itself gives them a lot of sense of control back. And I think even just that right there, you might find that students will start to follow along and not be so avoidant and rigid about things anymore. But if it's really about control, give them that control, show them what's going to happen.
Yeah.
But that's not actually giving up control. You're still guiding the whole thing. So
It's really good to hear you say all this, and it's stuff I feel I have to, a bit like with learning MLT, actually learning about MLT,
mhm.
I have to come back to some of the same
Oh yeah.
things. Difficult to internalize and always use in my everyday practice.
Yeah.
But I really, really, really important, and you see in the students how important it is. Yeah, thank you. This is really, really
Oh,
useful.
my pleasure. I'll figure out, we still need to touch on perfect pitch. I'll figure out another time to set up a meeting. It sounded like everyone was wanting like roughly like monthly or certainly like a few weeks out. Um, yeah, so I will do that. But it's lovely like chatting with you guys. Yeah, do you have a question?
I just had one thing. Hopefully it's small.
Yeah, no, that's fine. Go ahead.
But the other day I had a lesson with a student and I was asking him to improvise. Actually, no, I was asking him to switch different places, different registers for playing the patterns I was singing.
Okay.
Um, and with other students, it's typically okay. Like they enjoy figuring out, okay, I'm going to be up high for this pattern, I'm going to be down low. But I could see like having to make the decision
Mm-hmm.
was like a struggle a bit for him.
Yes. Okay.
So I I started telling him, like I would sing
Mm-hmm.
it, or no, I would say, okay, this one up high, and then I'd sing it, and then he'd
Mm-hmm.
go up high, and this one down low. And then that seemed to make it really easy.
Okay.
And I was just wondering, like, what, um, just maybe to help me like with other things with him,
Mm-hmm.
is that flexibility? Like, not in terms of me, but like how was I scaffolding? What was I scaffolding for him?
So that wasn't I wouldn't call that scaffolding anymore, because you went
Okay,
from
sure.
so scaffolding is trying to support like autonomous thought and learning and conceptualizing, right? So I guess I shouldn't like be that harsh. In what happened was you got to the point where you were basically you were directing his experience, right?
Hmm.
Whereas I'm coming from the point of view that we want to facilitate a student leading their own experience, because that's where a
Right.
lot of learning happens. And I think a lot of MLT kind of aligns with that. So like maybe what I would do in that situation, I've had to do that before, where you see the indecisiveness, and that's another executive functioning thing. And I see a lot with these kids where they're like, don't ask me to think anymore. Like, don't, and we all feel that, like, I don't know, you pick dinner. I don't want to choose. Like,
Yes.
right? So I will strategically guide with open-ended questions that are still supporting thought and engagement, but providing some support. So for example, I would say like, okay, so we're going to play around with different ways to do this. I wonder, could you play that for me the way that maybe like a butterfly would? Ooh, what about a kangaroo? How about a lion? Or if I'm specifically trying to get into like different ranges or octaves, because not all kids equate animals with octaves the same way. Sometimes
Right.
relationships are better. So I'd be like, okay, so what if a baby was playing this? And then what about mommy? Can I hear back and forth? I want to hear baby and mommy. And now what about, ooh, grandpa just came into the house. What would grandpas sound like? So that kind of direction, like we're still very much guiding it, but hopefully that helps.
That makes sense. Yeah.
Yeah,
And
like and
which which executive functioning thing is that? Or is it an executive functioning?
um so it's not just executive functioning per se. So part of that, where am I trying to go with this? I will break that apart more for you next time, because it really is, we all experience like that paralysis, and like the brain kind of like shuts off and doesn't want to think anymore. So
Right.
some of that is a function of executive functioning, but there's multiple things going on, and it can just be like exhaustion too, and things just not wanting to work anymore. Um, yeah, I'm gonna get back to you on that one,
Okay.
because
Fair
I want to
enough.
give you a good answer about that. But I do find facilitating and guiding thinking. So still they have to come up with an answer, they have to engage with it, but I'm giving them a lot of structure within that. Like that's why improvising is easier than creating.
Right.
Right? So if we
Right.
go back to that idea, don't ask them to actually create an answer, ask them to improvise an answer within a structure that we provide. So
Okay.
much easier. Um you're smirking over there, Melanie.
Just thinking about whether improvising is easier than creating. That's interesting.
Okay. I've always taken it that way, and I feel like I've heard other MLTers say that. Like if you think about like,
There's a spectrum, isn't there, of
oh, there
exploration,
absolutely
creativity,
is.
and improvisation. And yes, there are more restrictions, but there's higher level of audiation. Am I understanding that correctly? With improvisation, because the restrictions have to be understood, whereas with creating, there might not be as much. There might be stuff happening kind
Right.
of
Or what
out.
happens, I would argue, is that we end up self-imposing structure on creation. It's not
Mm.
imposed elsewhere.
Mm.
Um,
Oh, this is making sense. Like, because I know for adults and teenagers, like the older the student, the harder creativity is. Um, it seems to be, in my experience.
mhm.
And it's a lot of it is it's mostly psychological. Like it's in terms of like the feeling of discomfort, I mean.
Oh, yes, absolutely. And I will say I have adult students that are really, really comfortable with that. But yes, it's, the longer that we experience life, the more accustomed we are to impose structures. And so then it's harder
Right.
to break outside of that, right? Whereas a kid, you don't know structure as much. You're like, I'm gonna wear this random outfit today, and it totally works. I don't know about coordinating my clothes. And then
Right.
my son all of a sudden is in a tiger costume with a weird headband and like wings, and okay, kid, you do you. Yeah, that inhibition,
Right.
right? So yeah, it really does run a spectrum. But I do find actually I think a lot of that sort of like freeze up, it's almost like an anxiety kind of thing
Hmm.
going on, that like I don't want to make the wrong answer. They're assuming there's a structure there and they don't know what it is.
Right.
And so then
I
like
think it,
providing them a flexible one.
yeah. I think it's
Yeah.
also like it causes, I know I've seen with my most recent adult student, I it causes her like discomfort
Mm-hmm.
because she like improvising on random keys or just improvising when she doesn't know very much yet. It all sounds random to her. And
Yep.
she has enough musical experience where like it does sound
Okay.
random, you know what I mean?
Yes. So
And
it's really
she's
coming from
not
this
listening
concept
to
of
Schoenberg.
right and wrong and worrying about, am I going to get it right or wrong? And music, it's far more fluid than that, but
Right. But I'm
explain that to a
wondering if
kid.
that's also affecting this student because he also doesn't like to create as much on random keys. Like it's too random. And so I think
Uh-huh.
it
So,
becomes dysregulating because
right.
it's too random
So if you think about
and it
that
doesn't sound
spectrum of
right.
structure and non-structured, and think, where is he probably falling on this? And if he's struggling, do I need to provide some structure here? And then he'll be okay. And then you could try to scaffold and like, can we work towards less and less structure?
Right.
So I really do have to go. I'm sorry, I've got a student coming in just a few minutes. I could go on
Sorry.
literally
Thank you so much.
forever. I will announce when I'm doing the next one pretty quickly here, and hopefully we've got recordings of everything. But thank you guys.
Thank you so
Okay.
much.
Bye.